Well, the festive season can bring reason to cheer for consumer products businesses at all stages of the supply chain. It's obviously a prime season for retailers, and therefore everyone else who supplies retailers can also benefit. But it can also be quite a critical time for many businesses, which find themselves squeezed for cash at this time of year. The reason that companies find themselves squeezed for cash is that they need to stockpile to cater for the Christmas shopping spree, and that includes retailers, wholesalers, manufacturers and everybody in between. Cash is therefore tied up in the business for some time before you can reap the rewards, but bills still need to be paid.
When you add the stress of the December rent quarter day, which comes up normally on Christmas Day, then that obviously increases pressure, particularly because the payment of rent in December is actually for the post-Christmas period. It's payable in advance. So retail businesses are considering looking at their cash flow and what they've earned over the Christmas period, whether they can actually afford to pay the rent for the next period when it's going to be a post-Christmas quieter period. The economic downturn has made matters worse in the consumer products arena in recent years. The cost of raw material and fuel has increased notably, whilst consumer spending on certain categories of goods has reduced, although this is now showing more promise. But there are very mixed messages about the economy at the moment. Spending seems to be up. On the other hand, retail sales seem to be flat in the last couple of months, and so I think there will be a big pressure in the run-up to Christmas this year. In addition, changing consumer habits have also caught businesses out. For example, the popularity of music and media downloads has meant many traditional high street names have struggled.
The increase in so-called showrooming has also challenged the landscape, and showrooming, for those who don't know, is basically where consumers go out to the high street, have a look at things in person and then go home and order them on the internet. This has obviously caused quite a lot of issues for retailers who are on the high street. Given all of these factors, it's not surprising that some of the most well-known retail and consumer sector businesses have found themselves in an insolvency situation during the festive period or just shortly afterwards. Comet, Blockbuster, HMV and Jessops all collapsed within a short time of each other around the Christmas period last year. It's not just retailers that should be worried. There's always an entire supply chain that could suffer when a retailer goes out of business. Businesses involved in, for example, shop fitting, logistics, storage, services and manufacturing could also suffer considerable losses if a retailer goes down, and those supply chain businesses may also fail to recover.
Well, I think the trick is really getting ahead of the game, as it always is. We deal with issues that arise for all stakeholders when consumer products businesses go bust. And it's about trying to protect yourself, ideally, rather than trying to be reactive once the event has taken place. So, we act for the customer, we act for the supplier, we act for the landlord, the funder, etc. So we are aware of the differing agendas and the differing views that those parties have. There are proactive steps that can be taken to insulate businesses from the knock-on impact of financial difficulties suffered by major customers or suppliers, which in short involve looking at your contracts to remedy deficiencies and bolster your position. Seemingly basic points can make a big difference when you're trying to recover a debt or make sure you are paid on time. Examples of these would be, is it clear what the terms of your contract are? Do you have a contract in point? Can you actually look at one document and say this encompasses the contractual rights that we have? Does everyone know where they are? Secondly, what are the payment terms? How quickly can you take action for non-payment? How flexible are those payment terms? Can you bring them in? Can you tighten them up if needs be? Can you charge interest? When does that start to run? Is there scope to take a deposit or an initial payment on account? Where are you concerned about a counterparty's insolvency? Is there any scope for taking security? If there is, what kind of security might you be able to take? Often in a retail contractual situation, it's difficult to actually put in place security, but there might be issues like retention of title. As an alternative, can you take out credit insurance? For non-perishable goods, as I've briefly mentioned, does your contract supply adequately drafted retention of title terms? Can you actually retain title? As a matter of law, title will pass on delivery. So if you're trading on terms and delivering, you're going to lose title once you deliver, even though you're unlikely to be paid until some time thereafter. Retention arrangements can really assist with recovering your position on an insolvency, both before and after your customer goes bust. So it is something that is relatively cheap and a relatively good tool in trying to recover on insolvency. Boilerplate clauses are often seen as the boring bit that you can skip over, but actually that's the clauses that will be relevant to an insolvency situation, and they can be key. Things like governing law clause. Is it appropriate? Is it advantageous? Can the contract be assigned without your consent? If you're the customer under contract, can your debts be assigned by your supplier to an asset-backed lender or a factor who is likely to chase more rigorously for payment?
If you find that your supplier or your customer has gone into a formal insolvency process, it can feel quite mind-boggling because there's a lot of jargon involved, and as an unsecured creditor, you probably don't have much control. From a strictly legal perspective, unsecured trade creditors typically do not have a lot of influence, which would help them to increase their chances of recovering debts. However, a top tip to bear in mind is that the insolvency practitioner that will have taken over control of your supplier or customer, whoever it may be, that insolvency practitioner will be a commercial animal. He'll want to maximise return for creditors out of the insolvency process, but at the same time, he's also going to be really risk averse because he'll want to make sure that he doesn't incur any personal liability through trading the business. And that means that there may be tactical buttons you can push to increase your chances of recovery. It really is a balancing act between commercial and legal factors, and that's where our expertise will really come in handy.